Hello, this is DC Hammer, and this is the DC Hammer Show, and welcome to another Open Mind Friday broadcast. And with me in the channel today are Abigail. Abigail, you want to say hi?
Hi, thank you, DC, for inviting me.
Arrow.
Hello, glad to be here.
And Bandit will be coming in and out at times. Thank you, Bandit. So the context for what we're doing today, there was a video that I saw on YouTube. It was produced by a gentleman that goes by the handle online as Mr. Reagan. And he has a presence, he's got a channel on YouTube, and he also has a Twitter account. And if you catch him on Twitter, it's at Mr. Reagan USA. And if you're on YouTube, it's Mr. Reagan. And so on his YouTube channel, he did a video. It is a 23-minute video, and it was entitled The Brains Behind AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I watched that, and it really did bring to mind a lot of the issues that are going on as far as surfacing her, as what is her background, how in the world did she go from nothing to become a member of Congress so quickly. It couldn't have been on her own. There had to be something behind it. And so we drilled down on that, and the team that's here in audio right now have bitten off chunks of this, participated in getting ready for the show. I'd recommend that you watch that 23-minute video and then come back to this video and continue on. We're going to be talking about different topics, people, organizations, and other issues that came out through the broadcast.
A phrase pops into my mind with that description of how did these people become so prominent, especially AOC, so quickly. And the phrase is post-turtle. And I remember that phrase being used and had to be explained for me because I'm not from the South or whatever area that frequently uses that, is that when you see a turtle on a post, you know that he didn't get there by himself. So apparently that's a phrase, and that kind of describes what's happening. And they use for
a minute, I had no idea where you were going with that. But then as soon as you made me visualize it of an actual turtle sitting upon a post, I got it.
Yeah, they used to use that to describe George H.W. Bush, and of course it applies even more strongly to AOC and that whole crowd.
Got it. The AOC turtle sitting on a post. How in the world, if the post is the House of Representatives, how did a turtle like AOC get there? Got it. And so as Mr. Reagan begins his presentation and peels back the onion regarding the background of AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, it's not what you would think if you're just paying attention to the mainstream media. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has quite a few people behind her, people that have enabled her to get into the Congress. She just didn't do it on her own. She didn't just knock on doors and talk to people and end up in Congress. There was a unified effort of people that are activists on the left who came together for a variety of different reasons with a variety of different backgrounds in order to make her happen. In the women's magazine Elle, there's an article entitled Meet Alexandra Rojas, the Executive Director of Justice Democrats, who helped elect your favorite Congresswoman. And I know, Abigail, you've had a chance to take a look at the background of Alexandra Rojas.
One of the things that I found most interesting about her as I was looking at her, because I found the minutes from her college days when she was in the student government. What I found interesting about her is how she describes her desire to become politically active. She ties it back to what happened in 2008, around the time of the banker bailout. And she said that her family was impacted by that they had to lower their standard of living to some extent. So it was personal for her. She was very young. And it was interesting to me because I credit the banker bailout of 2008 with my becoming aware that something was wrong in our country and still is, that things are not as they appear to be. That was the same thing that motivated her to become active. Now, whereas I questioned the whole system, she blamed and continues to blame capitalism. And she is very openly opposed to capitalism.
And of course, the whole point there is that there's a straw man set up that has the label capitalism, but what really is, it's monopoly or crony capitalism, which isn't the real thing. So those of us whose roots go back far enough into Ron Paul liberty movement, et cetera, we've known these things for a long time, but a lot of these newcomers, they don't understand that, and they're falling into exactly the trap that the bankers had expected people to fall in. They want themselves ride this wave and gain power.
And let's not forget that the average American equates capitalism with Republicans or with the right. And
exactly.
If you're against capitalism, you're against the right.
As I read about her, it actually kind of made me question whether she might not actually have good intentions. Because I think, we tend to think that all these people, because we see the evil that is intended through them, we tend to, I think, make the assumption that they themselves have bad intentions. And ultimately, of course, and I'm not advocating for anything she advocates for, communism, socialism. I fully acknowledge that that's all very dark and is used to enslave humanity rather than to set us free. However, some of these young people, we know that they're idealistic, and they really, I think some of them might really believe that they're doing the right thing. And that's what makes this whole movement, that's what gives power to the Justice Democrats, is that people believe that in supporting the Justice Democrats, they are doing something positive for the world.
Yeah, and that's a definition of positive. And I go back to the article now. And as you scan down through it, at one point, it has a heading. For people who may not know, can you explain what Justice Democrats is? And so, in other words, this was the interviewer with Elle magazine asking Alexandria Rojas that question. Her answer was, Justice Democrats' mission is really to build a quote-unquote multiracial, progressive cohort of lawmakers that are actually going to institute the policies that we are pushing for, like Green New Deal, Medicare for all, free college, and making sure no candidates run on corporate PAC money. And so I would say I understand your take on it, but I would say that these are deluded people that turn around and use the exact same tactics of the people that they say that they oppose, because they have in essence created, and as we talk about other people that are involved in this movement, and where the money has come from to back this entire organization, including what Alexandria Rojas is doing, nothing could be further from the truth than getting away from PAC money. It's just getting away from corporate, and then if you want to, in brackets, have bank/white money, and what they're interested in is open borders/left money, but it's still PAC money driving this entire thing. And as she then continues, and as the interview went on, another bit of illumination that made me understand what she is all about is that they made a purposeful decision to go after the House, and they knew that they'd be more successful in targeting people. And so the targets that they selected, they were not going to use these words in these articles. You're not going to understand exactly what their purpose was. But she describes herself as, I'm a Latina who didn't see myself in terms of involvement in political strategy and field strategy. But she became part of the Bernie Sanders movement, and that's going to be a common theme throughout this entire revelation of who these people really are that are behind these people. She is a disaffected member of the Bernie Sanders for President operation in 2016, who realized that the real way to leverage power from the left, to use their ability to raise money and mobilize candidates that they thought would represent their perspectives better, was to join together and target specific candidates to run their people that they support, people that they believe, whose belief system, the bills that they would sponsor in Congress, or whatever you want to call it, would be more along the lines of what they would want. Many of these people, Alexandria Rojas included, did not think that Bernie Sanders was left enough. And they've taken care of that by pulling together the candidates that they ran for office in the midterm elections.
Do you see you made a great point there about they're not wanting PAC money, but in the process they just became another PAC. The problem is, as I see it, is they don't realize that themselves. So what they end up doing is breaking laws in the process, but they're breaking them out of ignorant idealism. So they're going to claim victim status when all these laws are broken just because they're naive. They'll just think that they're being picked on because the establishment is frightened of them. But all of these campaign finance laws that they're already under fire for breaking were actually put in place to be a watchdog over undisciplined use of finances, which is exactly what they're doing.
Right, and so their initial thrust was to target weak Democrat members of Congress, to take them out during the primaries, during the midterm elections in 2018, and insert their own candidates who were far more left-leaning than those moderate Democrats. But at the same time, and again, this is not what's specified in these articles, but I believe it to be true, they created a profile. Who are we going to go after? And then what they decided upon, don't listen to the words. Pay attention to what took place. Pay attention to what was done. They targeted white, male, moderate Democrats. And those are the ones they took out and replaced them with non-white, non-male, far-left candidates. And to a degree, they succeeded. And what they are intending to do for the future is then they will want, if they become successful, they only had a few people, but the few people that get elected one election, and then the next time, if you get 3 this time, and then you get 10 the next time, and then you get 20 the next time, you're building a movement then that substantially changes the balance of power. And then they want to take over in the future. Their long-term targets is the Senate and then the presidency of the United States.
It reminds me of building a stable of racehorses. And I was really impacted by and I think I have it in the Open Mind Friday, the screenshot from Wikipedia of, it's a red and green chart. They picked people to run. They ran them. Some of them won their primaries. Most of them lost their primaries, but a few of them won their primaries. So to me, again, the racehorse similarity, you have a stable of horses. You've chosen them for a reason. You've had a set of criteria. You run them, and if they win, you advance them. And if they don't win, you set them out to pasture and find new horses. But one of the main reasons I even bring this up is because doing what they're doing requires a substantial amount of money. To build this stable like this, to do trial and error, and to continue to learn and continue to build, there's money behind them.
What's the difference between these people and lobbyists throwing stupid money at congressmen to get what they want?
Nothing. There's no difference. You're not allowing the political process to work in the way that it was intended, the way that it was designed, for people that have their own ideas, their own slants of view, to then band with a party or whatever in order to just have support. But like-minded individuals, but then you are your own master. When you go to Congress, when you go to the Senate, when you go to the presidency, you are then doing things without a puppet master. What they are doing is they are throwing out people that, in my opinion, many of these, especially the moderate white male, the people that you look like Crowley in Brooklyn, they were part of the Democrat establishment and so on, but they actually put through bills that they designed. You're not going to see that from these people. My opinion, with what we talk about later, I think will paint a picture that will clearly outline this is exactly what is going on. These people did not work into the positions they hold now in Congress. They're not members of the House because they conjured up a vision for the future and exactly how to get there, their own plans. They are actors, many of them, who have been selected based on a nominating and audition process because they have the right look, they have the right background, and they are then put in these positions, and they are going to continue to be handed things to say in front of the cameras.
Yeah, exactly. They answer to casting call.
We keep going at this rate. Congress is going to be in the thousands. If every congressperson has a pack of a dozen people behind them telling them what to think and what to do and what to vote on, our Congress is going to be in the thousands, and then none of it's going to be what we voted for.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, is that there's the people that are elected, but there's the people that are actually proposing the bills and making things happen.
But my whole reaction to this was what Bandit just said. It's like, well, okay, so what else is new? I had basically seen Congress acting this way for a long period of time. They're not about what they actually believe in personally. They're up for sale, and
right.
they're advocates for whoever put them in office, and it's become a career. So the whole point is that I agree with people who want to have term limits so that you can't get this power behind the throne syndrome happening along. It takes these people a while, if they're new, to get up to speed to how to get things done. And then once they are up to speed with the process within Congress, then they become valuable to their power brokers. Now, if these people that are new, that are the Justice Democrats that are in there, begin to function as they already are, based on the ideology of the power behind the throne, they do become dangerous. They are already becoming dangerous. But what they're doing, I think, is really not that much different. This is a new political party being born. And like I said earlier, it's being born out of naivete. These people are breaking laws that were put in place to safeguard against misuse of political funds. So they're misusing political funds and breaking laws, and they see themselves as being innocent in doing that because they think that this is the way that you take over. And so, yeah, they need to be stopped with rule of law because they're abusing the system.
Right. The result of this is going to be beneficial to exactly what Bandit is speaking against, and that is these people in the shadows that are puppet masters. We know that Barack Hussein Obama was not elected on his own and that he was a puppet, and there were puppet masters who were pulling his strings the entire time that he was in politics. There's no doubt about that. And then many of these people, like Dinosaur Dianne Feinstein, she's a captured elite for the Communist Chinese. And everybody has these. But it was kept in the shadows. You couldn't figure it out easily. And that was because they were not only nefarious in what they were doing, but they were also careful, calculated, and mature in what they're doing. What you have now is an effort that's being pushed by, call them immature, but the people that are, don't have a whole lot of experience. They don't understand how to do things in a covert, behind-the-scenes way. They don't understand how it would have been in their best interest to make all this stuff happening with nobody finding it out. But once everybody now, very easily through people like independent citizen journalists like Mr. Reagan and others, and when you have places like to go on the internet like Wikipedia and other sources, you can very quickly connect the dots and the whole onion is exposed. All the layers are there, and in my opinion, this movement, and we'll talk about some of these other people, Cenk Uyghur, whatever his name is, and others, as they thought that they were going to use this to completely take down the government of the United States, the Constitution, and inhabit the presidency, remake this entire country in their own vision. They only would have been able, in my opinion, to make that happen if it was covert. It's so open. It's so obvious. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is so obviously not ready for prime time, but there she is in the spotlight. It will fall apart. Within the next election cycle or two, they will be exposed for what they are. They will continue to make legal mistakes that will put themselves in legal jeopardy. And my opinion is it will actually help bring the light of day to this dark process and be part of the taking down of the old puppet master, puppet bureaucracy that's been created, and prevent us from having a political system that is untainted by those things. And this may be ushering in, for the first time, a movement to establish term limits.
Sure, plus new laws, just new laws in general to prevent this in the future.
Yeah, although the laws are probably are largely on the books. Now, the other possibility, which is what I'm even more concerned about, then I think actually if this turns out the way you just described, DC, that'll be good. That'll be a gift. That'll be what many people are already saying, that what a gift AOC is to conservatives, because it shows how mindless the left is. But the people behind her are smarter than she is, and sometimes she actually does do some stuff. She was asking questions of someone that was testifying before Congress, and her questions were actually rather pointed and good about corruption. Now, if you wanted to game the system and get all the money you could, is there anything to stop you from doing it? And the person had to basically say, I could actually do what most people would find abhorrent and offensive, and there aren't really any laws stopping me. So sometimes she's brilliant, but one of the things that scares me the most is, this is the other possibility, that some of these people, and we'll get to one in detail more later, is the people that do have the legal expertise. In fact, some of them are even lawyers that know how to navigate this system. And what we're seeing now is just something in the early stages that may not fall flat on its face right away and may actually get some legs under it and be able to navigate and pull the strings of the legal system in a way similar to what Barack Obama did as president. And he had enough training in law that he knew how to avoid getting caught by the system.
Right. And so let's talk about some of those people behind her. We've talked about Alexandria Rojas. The next person that Mr. Reagan talked about in his video was a gentleman named Corbin Trent, Ocasio-Cortez's communication director. And if you take a look at this information from Pacific Pundit, Corbin Trent was immediately upon assuming his post and helping Ocasio-Cortez during the campaign, he was immediately doing things that were not by the book. He was doing things in a way that seasoned political operatives would have understood was going to create issues and enable others who, if Alexandria Rojas is legit, and her whole purpose was to quote-unquote get PAC money out of the election of candidates. I don't believe that's what she was saying. She just didn't want corporate PAC money. They're fully willing to accept PAC money from everything other than the people that they don't like. But she doesn't understand it. That's not how you craft a political system. You can't say, we believe in our cause, we don't believe in yours. Therefore, you're funded by people that we don't agree with. Therefore, you cannot have funding through those people. But we believe in what we believe, and the people that are funding us, therefore, they can do whatever they want to fund us. And so what happened was these Justice Democrats created their own PAC. And we'll talk about how the PAC then was funded through some very interesting means. And at the same time that this Corbin Trent was collecting a salary from the campaign, he was also getting money directly from the Justice Democrats PAC. So he was accepting money from two different sources. They're talking about how we need to get the influence of PACs out of politics, but he was accepting money from the Justice Democrats PAC at the point in time when he was leading her communication campaign to get her elected.
Yeah, one of the things that's clearly in operation here is that this would not have happened if the Democratic Party had not lost an election and become weak. They're weak, therefore you have opportunists rising from within, and Bandit had actually predicted that this is what would happen, and here it is in full bloom. But this shows the weakness of the Democrats and the attempted takeover from the left.
And it's interesting with this Corbin Trent, and you take a look at his background, once again you've got a disaffected member of the Bernie Sanders movement, that when Bernie Sanders was outed by Hillary Clinton, maybe a lot of these people, that although they were disaffected members of the Bernie Sanders effort, I have not found one of the people in the background of this that didn't some way have a connection to the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. But is there animus now against the quote-unquote Democrat establishment and their belief that what they need to do is take these unusually aggressive means to replace moderate or quote-unquote weak Democrats with people that support them on the far left? Could also one of the reasons for their disaffection be what Hillary did to Bernie Sanders to out him during the primary process? And this is one of their ways to see that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I agree. And thought comes to mind. There's a spiritual principle involved with martyrdom, and I don't think it always is necessarily, the people that are morally correct even that are the ones that are being martyred. And I'm thinking of Seth Rich, and it hasn't been proven, but a lot of people suspect that he was killed by the Hillary faction because of his support for Bernie Sanders within the Democratic Party. And perhaps, I'm just speaking like a spiritual hypothetical here, what you have is the multiplication that happens with a martyr of somebody like Seth Rich that spilled over into some passion within the Democratic Party. to unseat the established leadership.
Well, let's look at another side of this, too, is you've got Bernie Sanders, old, crazy-looking white man, and he didn't make it for one reason or the other, for whether it was the DNC, which, well, it was the DNC, but he didn't make it. Now they get young, nice-looking, Hispanic. They basically are staying with the same movement, but they just branding it differently. They've got the newer, younger version of Bernie that they hope more people will accept.
It's a new crop. The old crop is dying off, so to speak, and I mean that figuratively. They no longer have staying power politically, and this is the new crop. These are these are seeds that these young Justice Democrats. They're seeds that are being planted.
And I believe, as we've talked about before, that this is the fault of the Democrat Party to not have had a movement within their own ranks to ensure that they were growing leaders for the future. The dinosaurs like Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi wanted to hang on to their power positions until basically somebody had to carry them out on their shield. And they didn't want to give up their power that they had assumed over the years. Therefore, they were not interested in growing a group of Democrats to replace them and have a continual organizational development strategy to ensuring that their party survived by growing new talent and enabling them to move up through the ranks. The people that assumed the levels at the top, the people like Pelosi, she wanted to stay there forever in that role with the gavel in her hand. In my mind, that strategy that she has to stay in power forever, it may work in communist governments, like this is, you take a look at any communist government, that's exactly how it runs, with people like Stalin and Mao staying there until they were either deposed, murdered, or died in office, and then a new group would take over. What I don't think they envisioned, and they couldn't have because the new generation had not matured yet, but the danger of the millennials, and whatever you call the generation after the millennials is, this is a boomerang in my mind against the left in that they infuse the educational environment with like-minded leftists and grew a new generation and the generation after the millennials that are even further left than their predecessors. So you've got this combination of no bullpen, a group of Democrats working their way up through the ranks to then take over in a structured and orderly way. Instead, you've got young Turks. The reason I threw that out will become obvious as we go through the additional material. We'll need to break this up into a couple sessions to get through it all. But what they didn't envision was the next group would be far more radical and different, left-leaning than they are, and continue the Democrat policies, but would think that the Democrat policies aren't left enough, and so their target is not just taking on the Republican opposition, but burning down their own house and replacing it with their vision.
Not to take away from what you said about Nancy Pelosi and the dinosaurs, because I do fully believe that they want to hang on to power as long as possible. However, I can't help but see this vacuum that was created as part of a plan, because now these young people who are filling this vacuum are easy to control. They're idealistic. They know that they're turtles on posts, right? I mean, they know they couldn't have gotten where they are without somebody putting them there. And so they'll be beholden, and they won't have maybe the whether it's good or bad, the kind of pride or dignity that somebody who's been in Congress a little bit longer might have to be able to resist being controlled to some extent. So again, I think it's very possible that this is a contrivance that someone intentionally was not raising up new leadership in the Democratic Party because they had a plan for something like this.
This article by Dreyshare goes into the background of Corbin Trent and gives you a little more understanding of exactly what he's all about and what motivates him. He's 31 years old. He's been a political activist apparently since he was in college or thereafter. He's been fundraising. He's a volunteer, so he joins into different leftist movements that he agrees with. And naturally, one of them was a support group for Bernie Sanders in 2016. It was called the Brand New Congress. And that was to support Bernie Sanders. And in fact, Corbin Trent apparently then was a volunteer dedicated to the 2016 campaign. And he's another one of these people that was disaffected by what led up to the defeat of Bernie Sanders through the primary process. And he is the co-director of the Justice Democrats. He considers the Justice Democrats and that brand new Congress to be grassroots organizations. And his motive is to support the people, not to churn out money. The layers of irony. Primarily, he focuses on grassroots issues. However, interestingly enough, he holds some political interests too. He calls himself the supporter of Democrats.
When I looked at the Justice Democrats website, I did not see anything about page. I find that kind of interesting that they emphasize the women, Alexandria Rojas and Nasim Thompson. And I'd like to mention just real briefly one thing about Nasim Thompson that I learned in doing a little bit of research on some of these women. I couldn't find a whole lot about her in just kind of a cursory bit of research. But one thing I did find was what she has on Pinterest. She has 20 different interests expressed on Pinterest. So these people know how to absolutely master social media.
Talks about our mission is to elect a new type of Democratic majority in Congress, one which will create a thriving economy and democracy that works for the people, not big money interests. So you can tell these are zealots. In my opinion, these are ignorant zealots that don't understand that they are participating in the most robust, free, and thriving economy in the history of the world already. And if they believe that they are going to replace the most thriving, robust economy in the world with a fascist, communist dictatorship and point us on the road to Venezuela, and in their mind, that is the way to quote-unquote get out the big money interests. But aren't they creating new big money interests to replace the old big money interests? Just they are big money interests that they agree with. I put this back to, again, a fault of our education system that has raised this two new generations now, the millenniums and the one following them, to completely ignore the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest political system in the history of the world, the greatest economy in the history of the world, and to believe that it is evil, and the way that they're going to replace it is using the ideals, the methods, the techniques that are pushed by fascists, communists, dictators, and tyrants.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize is that Vladimir Lenin invented modern marketing and the whole communist program in Russia that, of course, has since failed because it doesn't have economic legs that are solid to stand on, was a Justice Democrats model. It was all about communicating that we are the future, we the people are going to, save you from the special interest and the big money, and that's what their whole push was. And thankfully, Russia eventually rejected that, but there's a lot of pain in the process, and we see communists in China, Red China, going down the same road. America does not have to go down that road.
But that's the road they want it to go down because they're ignorant of what it leads to. And there is no path towards communism, Marxism, socialism, whatever you want to call it, towards a totalitarian regime that does not end up in stacks of bodies, blood in the streets, and the creation of a society that's based on a new set of elites and everyone else is enslaved. And I gather it's okay in their minds, either innocently, and they believe this communist utopia vision that actually it just hasn't been done the right way yet. And that they have the answer to how, with all of the failures of Marxism and communism over a century worth of blood, 100 million dead, but they know better. And even with recent examples, Hugo Chavez did in Venezuela, followed by Maduro, and what is happening now, that people are drinking water out of sewer pipes and rooting through trash cans for food, that just won't happen because they're enlightened. They're smarter. They're the new generation. They can do it. They're the millennials. Just get behind us, and we'll take you into the new vision for the world. We will win.
And will they be the elites then?
Absolutely. And that, you connected those dots perfectly, Bandit. They become the new elites that sit there and they rule over the mass of bodies and slaves.
Somebody who's not a liberal in their youth has no heart, and somebody who's not a conservative in their older years has no brain. So I think about these people. Some of them are, I'm sure, are read in and they actually understand the dark plan. But many of them are probably just, they're young and don't have that much experience with things of the world and economics and so on. They haven't seen that much happen yet.
Let's go back to a show we had a couple of weeks ago, and let's just say that schools are taken over by communism. They've taught them what they want them to know, and they don't want them to know that communism doesn't work.
When it all collapses, the communist dream is shown to be fake, when there's either a new stack of hundreds of millions of bodies, or that people like President Trump will ensure that the United States never becomes a socialist nation / communist nation. Let's just say sometime 10, 20 years from now, and the light shines. They are now older. They did go through that transition of, in their youth, they were far left, and then when they became mothers and fathers and actually learned their elbow from a hot rock, they then became more conservative. That, let's say they're at that point in time, if they point back and say, I was just led astray by my teachers and people like Alexandria Rojas, now, I'm not going to accept that. You're still responsible to do your own research and make your own decisions. If you're led like a sheep and you become a sheep, then it's not your fault, because you had the opportunity to do independent research and to educate yourself about the way the world really works.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, DC, there's a lot of adults that I know that think that way, and they have never either taken the time to educate themselves or they don't want to.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, understand that fully, but in my mind, that's their fault. They can't point to, my teacher, my fifth grade teacher was a communist, therefore I've got an out. No, I'm sorry.
I do believe that common sense is not given to everyone at birth, and I'm sorry, but there's just a lot of people that doesn't have common sense. And if you believe in socialism, communism, the Democratic Party at this point in your life, you have no common sense.
Understand.
There's so many things.
That's exactly why America has been deliberately dumbed down, because the ruling elites cannot rule over a people that are actually self-starters, that are motivated, that are disciplined, that are able to run their lives themselves. They want a victim class that they can divvy out all of the spoils to after they get them first. So there has been a deliberate dumbing down of America. Charlotte Iserbyt actually detailed that, and she was within Ronald Reagan's cabinet as an undersecretary of education somewhere down the line there, and saw the plan to merge America with Russia. That was the elite's plan. Ronald Reagan wasn't big enough to stop it. So we're fighting something that has been deep-seated for a long period of time. But fortunately, people like you and me are speaking out, and some people are going to get a handle on how to overcome it. I can't help but think of this whenever Bernie Sanders comes up, and it just is, sometimes I'll have to agree with the left. The persuasion, the best persuasion techniques are not always pure logic. Sometimes you have to use a little bit of imagination and ridicule, and I think this is the perfect meme for Bernie in a nutshell. Capitalism is bread lined up waiting for people, and socialism is people lined up waiting for bread. When Bernie Sanders comes up, I like to think about, I don't always comb my hair, but when I do, I use a balloon.
You have been listening to episode 1 of a multi-episode presentation on the brains behind AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and we will continue to use the video material that was provided by Mr. Reagan on his YouTube channel, and we will continue over the next few weeks to bite off this material one portion at a time, as much as we can go through in a weekly session. And so look forward to additional broadcasts, part 2, part 3, and so on, about the brains behind AOC. And I want to thank everybody for this morning. I want to thank Abigail, Arrow, and Bandit for their contributions as we've participated in this roundtable discussion. There will be more to come. Thank you for listening, and God bless. And now the DC Hammer Show is available as an audio podcast. Just go to Podcast Garden or iTunes and search for DC Hammer or News Narrative Analysis Associates, NNAA.